And good morning, everyone. I'm Judith Alberts, and I'm going to start sharing my screen for our intro. There we go. All right, welcome to the November 2021 Learn and Grow presentation from the Williamsburg Botanical Garden. My name is Judith Alberts, and I serve on the garden's board of directors. Housekeeping for today. Yes, we're recording. We'll post this on YouTube. And everyone who signed up for the event, the live event, will receive a link to the recording and to resources that Dean is going to talk about. Please make sure that you are muted, and we recommend that you turn off your camera for privacy. Close other applications and devices that are using bandwidth. And we're going to use the chat box for questions, and our speaker will answer them at the end. And please bear with us because we're volunteers. So as people are entering the waiting room and on Zoom here, I see lots of names, people who are regular garden visitors, volunteers, and Learn and Grow attendees. Welcome back. For anyone who is new, the first thing to know about the Williamsburg Botanical Garden is that it's open every day of the year from 7 a.m. till dusk, and it's always free to visit. Canines are welcome to visit with well-behaved humans on a leash. The garden is quite small. It occupies 2 acres inside a roundabout that's 3/4 of a mile in from the Freedom Park entrance on the way to the parking lot. You'll drive around one side of the garden and pass the decorative pedestrian entrance, which is in my virtual background. And after you park, take the paved walking path from the lot and take a hard right pedestrian gate that you passed on your way. We're only 2 acres, but we pack a lot in with 18 distinct areas, including a wildflower meadow, woodlands, an English style garden, wetlands, native grasses, to name only a few. The garden is intentionally more natural than what you might expect when you hear the words botanical garden. It is not a precisely manicured display of exotic, high maintenance plantings. It's more like a wild child. We emphasize native plants and gardening practices that support pollinators, such as leaving stems standing during the winter to provide food and habitat. The garden is officially registered as Monarch Butterfly Way Station number 3394. Our mission is to demonstrate environmentally responsible and sustainable gardening that is practical for the Virginia coastal plain and to offer education on related topics. Hence, here we are today. Everything is tended by dedicated volunteers. We have a very slim budget, so here comes the pitch to support the garden. It is a 501c3 nonprofit corporation. We receive no funding from any government agency. We rely on donations. Learn and Grow programs are free. Before COVID, the donations jar was a steady stream of income for the garden, and we really appreciated that. So the follow-up email will include a handy-dandy link to the virtual donations jar. We encourage supporting the garden through membership. There are benefits to membership, and you can learn more on our website. Ordering bulbs from Brent and Becky's in Gloucester, Virginia. Please start at bloominbucks.com and select the garden in the drop-down menu of the organizations that are part of their program. They donate a very generous 25% of your order to the nonprofit of your choice. And holiday shopping is in full swing. In fact, if you're just starting your holiday shopping with all of the supply chain issues that we're hearing about and experiencing, you might be a little behind the 8 ball there, but start at smile.amazon.com if you shop Amazon. We now have 34 supporters on Amazon, And it would be great to add a few more during this holiday shopping season. Doing your ordering on Smile costs you nothing. The prices are the same. Your Prime membership, if you do that, you still get those benefits, and it is available on a mobile app. So please, 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 if you don't support us, at least support somebody, because every penny counts for every nonprofit. Our Facebook page is still unpublished. It happened right after the October outage. No warning, no reason, just poof, it was gone. We will have to reconstruct a page and take some of our old photos and upload them with backdating, etc. And this is going to be a good project for the winter time. But the Milkweed Connection Group is still viable and active, and it is intended for local monarch crusaders to share milkweed when we all get desperate at the end of the monarch breeding season. The garden is also on Instagram and YouTube, and the garden is now listed as an official observation site in the Nature's Notebook project. I encourage you to watch the October program. It is posted on YouTube. It explains what phenology is and talks about Nature's Notebook. We'll be launching the Nature's Notebook team in late winter and early spring. Coming in 2022, our programming for Learn and Grow is to be announced. April 23rd, we'll have an Earth Day Arbor Day celebration at the garden, and the Honor Box plant sale will open. On April 30th, the Master Gardeners will hold their plant sale within the garden. And on May 14th, the Native Plant Society will have their sale at the garden. Make sure that anybody who registered on Zoom will be added to our e-news list. But if you're watching this on YouTube as a recording, please make sure that if you want our information, you can sign up at the bit.ly WBG News, and that will add you to our email list. Last item, Master Gardeners and Master Naturalists, remember to report your time as continuing education in better impact. Today's program is 10 gardening tips for more birds in your yard. I wonder if that is going to be, oops, sorry. At any rate, 10 gardening tips for more birds in your yard. And our speaker is Dean Chostek. Dean is a lifelong resident of Williamsburg, Virginia. Some may know him as a performer of rare 18th century musical instruments, such as Ben Franklin's glass harmonica, not harmonica, harmonica. Others know him for his love of nature. Dean is an active member of the Virginia Master Naturalists, the Williamsburg Bird Club, excuse me, garden is on my mind, Williamsburg Bird Club, and is finishing up his internship as an extension master gardener. He's a volunteer at the garden, and his store, The Backyard Birder, donates seed every month to help fill our garden's bird feeder. So thank you and welcome to Dean Chostek. I'm going to stop my share, and the mic and screen are yours, Dean.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And let me go to sharing my screen, and Judith, so you're going to take over letting folks in.
Yes.
Good morning, everybody. So let me see, make sure I can get this right. Oops. And how's that look?
Looks good.
There we go. We're professionals here. Okay. Well, this is I'm going to try for an hour with this program. It is an overview of strategies to attract more birds to your yard. It's going to be a mixture of things that I found in research, my own personal experience, and I really hope you enjoy it. It's going to be a little bit of it can be technical in some places, but I'm going to really try to keep it light. And I'm going to see if I can reduce down to just, there it is. Okay. All right. So there I am. And as you heard, I am an extension Master Gardener speaker. I am an intern, and it's kind of fun. You have to have so many hours.
Okay.
And
Oh,
Judith, can you hear me? Anyway, so if you satisfy your hours, then you become not just an intern, but a full-fledged Master Gardener. So at the very end of this talk, I will be a fully fledged Master Gardener. So this is my weird little like Zoom graduation thing. So let me see. I'm trying to, and it's not advancing that way. There we go. I can do it that way. Okay, so the name of the program is 10 Tips for More Birds in Your Garden. And we are going to see how we can, make this happen. Now, the first part of the talk is going to be about native plants. And this is just where I really want to focus, a lot of time and thought. And I want to give you some resources and, eventually a place where you can find those plants. And this is this is really going to be where we're going to be focusing a lot of our thinking, because what we're trying to do is recreate habitats, and we're going to even define what that is. So it's it's going to be a lot about habitat restoration and the reasons why for that too. After we talk about that a little bit, I'm going to talk about leaf litter and how important that is. And this is very timely. We're in the fall where we're raking our leaves and we're blowing them away. And I'm going to try to convince you to keep them in place because the birds and the bugs really need them. After we do that, we're going to talk a little bit about dead trees that might still be standing in your yard, also called snags. These are really important to the bird community. And I'm going to try to, convince you of that as well. Obviously birds need water, and we're going to talk about different water features and some strategies there. Feeders, obviously if you are trying to attract birds to your yard, it makes sense to think about feeders. Nest boxes or birdhouses. There are better birdhouses and worse birdhouses, and we're going to talk about some about their designs and placement and just ways to make those birdhouses more successful. And then we get into some things that we've been doing to make things harder for the birds, for example, like, with our cats. And we'll talk about, where we are with that and some things we can do. Windows actually are a real danger to birds. And so I want to touch on that for a little bit. Pesticides, and I'll talk a lot about this, but basically as we are trying to create these native gardens in our yard and bring nature back to our homes, if you start spraying with pesticides, you are just working against all the efforts that you're putting into it, and maybe some strategies there too. And finally, get involved. And although it seems like kind of an odd one on the list, I do firmly believe that the more you get involved in this community, the more you learn about birds, the more you become engaged. I think the more you can bring that back to your own backyard. So with all that, I want to start actually with some images from Cornell Lab, and they have some pretty grim news for us. Since 1970, we've lost 2.9 billion birds, which is just an insane amount of birds to consider we've lost. Now, I think back, I was 6 years old in 1970, so I was a little kid, and I can still remember seeing, meadowlarks out on the playground, hearing the bobwhite. I mean, these were birds that were just part of my everyday life that we just don't see and hear anymore. Those of you folks that, maybe just a little bit older than me, or just even my age, you know what I'm talking about. This is a big change within, not just that many years. And it's something we need to start thinking about. Overall, we've lost 1 in 4 birds since 1970. And the estimates are that if we continue on this trend, we're going to lose another 25% of birds by 2050. So obviously we need to kind of change course here, and there's lots of things we can do. Just to kind of drill down a little bit more to talk about specifically some of the birds that are in trouble, barn swallows, and I'm going to be mentioning local areas. If you drive out on the loop on Jamestown Island in the spring and summer, you can see these beautiful barn swallows there. We've lost 2 in 5 of them. But, as far as a larger group, we've lost almost a third of the aerial insectivore population. And those are birds that catch insects on the fly. Purple martins are a good example of this. Obviously, so are barn swallows. We've lost so many of those birds, again, because we're losing so many bugs. And we will come back to that again. All right, last year we were lucky. There were actually quite a few evening grosbeaks that visited our area, and I hadn't seen them in years. And then, of course, in this image, we see that we've lost 9 in 10 of the evening grosbeaks that we had in 1970, which is just shocking to think how many of those birds are gone, and why it's such an event to see one now. Eastern meadowlarks are considered, I always thought they were a very common bird, but man, you have to really look for one now, having lost 3 in 4. And you can see we've lost up to half our population of grassland birds since 1970 again. Baltimore Orioles, we tend to get some of the winter here. We've lost almost half of those, and these are migrating birds. Migratory patterns have shifted. Because of the things that we've done, we've made it harder for the birds to migrate. And again, as we're trying to help them, we need to maybe think about some new strategies here, because truly these are things we can do. All right, so I mentioned it's about habitat loss. And so we kind of have to, think just a little bit about what is it that we describe as habitat. And obviously there's, the food, birds need food, and there's a tufted titmouse with a little bug in its bill there. Water is so important, and I'm going to give you some ideas of how to, add a water feature to your yard, and again, ways to make it clean, location, and make that more effective. Shelter can be anything from that cavity in the tree for that woodpecker to some bushes that have enough branches that the birds can feel safe to build their nests and find some cover. So one of the we don't talk about a lot when we talk about habitat is space. And if you think about bluebirds, they need about 300 feet between their houses. So this is out on the Colonial Parkway, and I don't know if you can see this, but let me see if my mouse works. Can you guys see my mouse swinging around here? Okay, so this is one of the boxes, and then 300 feet away there's the next one, and then there's the next one. If they just pile these close together, they're too close. And remember, bluebirds are hunting birds, and if we don't give them enough space to create a hunting ground, they won't occupy nearly as many of those boxes. National Geographic has this really wonderful definition of what a habitat is, and it's for all organisms. But just as you're listening, think in terms of birds. A habitat is a place where an organism makes its home. A habitat meets all the environmental conditions an organism needs to survive. For an animal, that means everything it needs to find and gather food, select a mate, and selectively reproduce. And so when we talk about bird habitats, we actually, can break it down into 4 different groups. Woodland habitats, and that's really most of what we're going to be talking about today, with our wooded backyards. But some of us do get to live on ponds and lakes, and so we may touch on that a little bit with aquatic habitats. But the other 2, you were really looking at, places further west, the shrub habitat, and then the open habitats. But these are the 4 that, if people talk about bird habitats, that's really what they're going to break it down into. But we're going to talk about mostly the first and kind of tight slightly about the second one. When you're thinking about habitat in your yard, it's best to think in layers. We start with the herbaceous layer, and those are the grasses and sedges, low-lying plants. It's obviously where provides a lot of hiding ground for the ground birds. And then we get into a lot of what we have in our yards, where these shrubs and small trees. You see there's a fruit tree there, and just at the I'm going to use my mouse again. So notice there's a dead tree here. There's a snag. We're going to be focusing on that, how important those are. And then the large trees. And in this case, yes, you can plant large trees, but I'm going to make the point. If you have a large tree, please think very carefully before you take it down. That is such an important habitat for the birds and insects and bugs that are already there in the first place. All right, this is another way of looking at it. We go back to that that ground cover, that's where you're going to find your sparrows. Understory, those are the kind of the eye level height bushes. That's where we're going to find our mockingbirds. Bluebirds tend to hang in that area. Looking a little bit further up with your binoculars, you're going to find jays and cardinals and chickadees. Now they will come down to your feeder, so this is not always exactly where they have to be, but they rely on that. And then if you look up in the top of the trees, that's where you're going to find things like nuthatches and woodpeckers. I find the nuthatches tend to like I'm always feel like I'm really looking way up high to find those nuthatches. We're not going to focus so much today on the above the canopy species, the vultures and hawks that are flying overhead, but they certainly are important and they are worth our consideration too. This was created and given to us by the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. So this is maybe a little bit different than what we were thinking here, but a lot of these trees and shrubs and ground cover still apply to us here. It gives you some idea of what birds might occur in different parts, different parts of the levels that you're creating. So if you go out to the Williamsburg Botanical Gardens, you'll see this cool little sign. It's provided by National Wildlife Federation. This is where you can create a certified wildlife habitat. And you don't have to just be the garden to do this. Actually, you can, as a private resident, if you meet the criteria, you get this cool plaque, and actually there's even a cooler metal one you stick in your yard. We moved recently from across town from, we're downsizing since all the kids off to college. So the house that we had, we went through this process and got this great metal plaque that we put right out by the street. We wanted everybody to know that we were interested in doing this. We got a lot of people asking about it. And as a result, there were actually some of our other neighbors who took the effort to do this. And this is the questionnaire that they send you. I know that the writing's really small here. I'm going to zoom here a little bit, but it's a self-reported process. They're not going to come out with a clipboard and check on this, but they do rely on you to do this. And look at the first three things they're interested in. They want food, water, and cover. They're the things we think of when we think of habitat. And then you have to apply, 2 or 3 different things in each of the categories. And you can see these are things that you can do, with a bird feeder, with a bird bath. So it's not something you have to start digging up the ground and putting in, some sort of pond, but or maybe if you live in the water, you already have some of these things available. Shelter can take a lot of different forms, caves on there, which I thought was funny, but there's, brushes and we will talk about, why you want to leave the leaf litter on the ground. Dense shrubs, we had some really seriously dense shrubs that were just filled with birds. And at the end of the season, when the leaves would fall, we saw all the different nests that were being built in there. And then, it continues on. I remember National Geographic's definition about, having a place where they can raise young. They want to know that you've actually considered 2 places where that could happen. So life will continue. And finally, they want you to consider sustainable practices. And you can see a list here, some of the things they consider interesting, like, maybe creating a native garden, native plant shows up here, composting, eliminating chemical pesticides. So anyway, if you follow this, you've actually gone a long way to restoring habitat to your yard, and it's something that's well worth doing. And thanks to them, we get a sign we can actually show that we've done it. So it's worth actually stopping for a second and asking, what is a native plant? And in a nutshell, very basically, it's a plant that lived here before European settlement. And so these are plants that have been around for a very, very long time. The birds, insects, and others, they're comfortable with these plants. They know how to use them. As we introduce ornamentals and non-natives, they don't fit into the plan very well. But just in forms of food, there's seeds. There's bugs that will eat these plants that provide the food there too. Nectar, and we'll talk about this with specifically with hummingbirds. Shelter, there's those snags that I'll be getting to in a minute that could provide nesting cavities. They're roosting, roosting sites in the winter. You think about how much They depend on this, when it gets really cold to get out of the elements, and then probably provide cover from predators. Even water, I think, falls under this list when you can actually, get juice from the berries. So this is, this is just as for starters why native plants are so important to us. When you're considering structuring a native plant garden, you use some of the same thinking that you do when you're just planting a regular garden, maybe just using all ornamentals. Aesthetically, you want to create something that has layers to it. But if you remember those images that I showed earlier, there are certain birds that will only be interested in that bottom growth, and then we have others that really thrive in the mid-story, and then there's other birds like the cedar waxwing that you're going to have to really look way up at the top of the tree if you want to see them come through. So if you could try to provide some of each, and again, if it's a case of a large tree, that you may be making the decision whether you're going to take it down or not. And this hopefully will help you decide this. This is a great shot from the Botanical Garden. And I would encourage you to go there and some of the other native gardens in the area where you get some ideas of just how these plants kind of work together. And honestly, I just think just how beautiful they are. Another strategy is to try to have fruit-bearing plants that will have fruit on them all year long. And to do this, you're going to have to think about which plant produces its fruit during different seasons. For example, in the winter, now we're seeing the American holly, the winged sumac, and the eastern red cedar. This is a picture from my yard with winged sumac. People hear sumac and they immediately think poison sumac. No, winged sumac it's not it's not poisonous to us, and the birds go crazy for it. By the springtime, we do have native blueberries, service berries, and even the wild strawberries. Summer, this is one thing that I got really interested in, just from my own personal experience. The house that we had just had tons of pokeweed in it, and I just watched the birds all through the summer and into the fall, just tearing into those pokeweeds. They couldn't get enough of them. And then there's a couple of mulberry, trees in some of the parks here. And I love going there and just watching the mulberry trees because I see so much variety of birds. So I decided to try to put a stand of mulberries in my yard. And they're tricky because only the female mulberry is going to produce a fruit. And so I planted 6 of them, figuring one of these has got to be a female. So they're about 2 or 3 years old. I haven't seen a fruit on them yet. I'm hoping for next year. In the fall, beautyberry is just this really spectacular plant. I would encourage you to make sure if you go to buy this from a nursery, that you get the native blueberry. And then the flowering dogwood provides so many, different things for the birds and for the bugs that they're relying on. And we're going to actually focus on flowering dogwoods just here in a second. There's even seed-bearing plants. And if you go to the native plant sales, which we'll talk about at the end, these are pretty common to find, and they do very, very well here. The New England Aster. Joe Pyeweed is this really cool plant that just has all these seeds at the end. I've even seen butterflies on them. Black-eyed Susans, they get used a lot in just regular landscaping, but man, the birds like it. There's a picture on the left of a goldfinch, pulling the seeds out of one. Orange coneflower, sunflower. There's a lot of varieties here too. So I keep coming back to bugs. Bugs are a really big part of birds' diets, and especially in different times of year. For example, once they get to the summer months and they have those chicks, even if the bird, you think of it as a seed eater, they are going to shift over to bugs to feed their young, because that's the easiest thing for them to eat and digest. So this is why they actually lay their eggs in the summer, because there's more bugs for them. Goldfinches, just as an aside, they're one of the rare exceptions. They still are willing to eat seeds and partially digest or regurgitate to them, but that's the exception. Almost all the other birds that we think of, like for example, like a cardinal, we think of cardinal as a seed eater, but the pair is feeding bugs and insects to their young. So this is going to be why we're going to be talking a lot about pesticides here in a little bit. We are trying to increase the amount of bugs in our gardens, and as we're planting native gardens or even just with the trees that are there, we want more bugs on our plants. It's going to attract more birds. It's going to make for a healthier, habitat system. Bugs are very much a key element to doing this. So this is I like this picture because they look like they're holding, it's only way too big for them, but they have it. Both these birds are in steep decline. They need our help. And so again, you see what they have in their mouths: the common grackle on the left, and then the purple martin on the right. And this is this is just a really good example of just how important bugs are. In both these cases, they're bringing them back to the young. So I just want to study just two trees that have kind of a similar use in our yards, and just how incredibly different they are from the point of view of a bird or insects. We moved to a condo now. In our front yard, we have this really towering Crepe Myrtle, and then in the backyard we have this really, really beautiful flowering dogwood. So just to take the Crepe Myrtle, for example, it's not from here, it's native to China. It does produce these seed pods in the wintertime. And yes, if the goldfinches are absolutely desperate, they will actually, try to eat some of the seeds. But most of the seeds are going to fall on the ground. I mean, I could get into all the other reasons why I really wouldn't want another Crepe Myrtle in my life. They're constantly dropping something in your yard. The bark's falling off of it. When those big flowers come, they just can't. They dump off. The leaves are gone. I mean, it is just a constant messy tree. But those flowers, when they arrive, you think that might be something that the butterflies are interested in for the nectar. Butterflies don't even recognize it. They don't go to it. The only bug we found on our Crepe Myrtles are the aphids, and that's just not what we're looking for if we're trying to find bugs to increase the food supply for the birds. As opposed to this, the flowering dogwood, documented over 60 birds that will eat the dogwood berries. Again, we talk about how messy a tree is or not. Those berries are so desirable. It is really very, very uncommon to find any of those berries by the springtime. My dogwood out in the backyard is just covered in berries now, and I see birds on it all the time. We think of dogwoods as have those beautiful flowers in the springtime, and there's just dozens of birds that use as a nectar plant. It's a little confusing with butterflies because we talk about them being nectar plants, where they come and they sip the nectar out of the flower. But then there's another type of plant that butterflies use, which is the host plant. That's where they lay their eggs, and where the caterpillars rely on that food supply. The flowering dogwood is a host plant to several butterflies and moths that I'll get to in a minute. Another reason to consider planting. In fact, I'm about to take down not that Crepe Myrtle you saw, but another one that we have, and replace with a dogwood. They are native to Virginia, but they've been in decline pretty seriously since the 1980s. They have I'm not sure I'm going to pronounce it, a Discula fungus, with produces a disease called anthracnose. There we go. I finally spit it out. It's a hard thing to treat, and one of the treatments is to just get in there. If you see it, just prune the leaves, try to water it. Make sure the tree stays as healthy as it can. There are dogwoods that are fighting back from this, but it showed up not that long ago, and it's something we need to consider. Now, I'm focusing on dogwoods, but if I were to pick oaks, we know oaks are host to over 100 Lepidoptera, which include moths, butterflies, and skippers. And that's an oak tree. And so, as you consider what's on an oak tree, you have all these different caterpillars that are eating the leaves, building their cicadas, or, the cocoons, and some moths may be down on the ground. Oaks are extremely important, to that group of insects. So I talk about a host plant. Here's just a couple of really cool, butterflies and moths that call the flowering dogwood its actual host. The spring azure on the top, and the Io mouth, that's the caterpillar for the bottom. The dogwood thyatyrid moth and the grand arches moth are also specific to the dogwood. So again, if we lose the dogwood, we lose these moths and butterflies. They are very important. And again, it's back to that Crepe Myrtle, where the number is 0. And I didn't list all the ones here. We can talk about over a dozen, you know, different ones that moths and butterflies. They're going to use the flowering dogwood as its host plant for you know, for the caterpillar through the chrysalis. Now, it is overwhelming to try to figure out what in the world you're going to plant in your yard. And luckily, there are some great publications that are out there. These are free. In our modern digital age, all you have to do is go to these websites and click on the PDF and download it, and you have just a completely clean version of it. And these are some of my 3 favorite ones. On the left is one by DWR, it's Habitat at Home. And the one in the middle is by the Virginia Cooperative Extension, which is the kind of the top organization that manages Master Gardener. It's just a wonderful resource with lots of ideas in it. The one on the right I like also. It's by Backyard Conservation. This is put up by the Audubon Society. A lot of stuff about birds in there. And again, all 3 of those don't cost you a cent. And again, you're going to be getting a set of links, and you can find those in there too. Lots of great reading. But, you know, as you get in there, you're going to find some, you know, some redundancy. They're going to, you know, they want to make sure you know what to look for to plant. And I'll be talking about native plant sales at the end. But if you go to these, you can actually find a lot of these plants already there, ready to go. You'll probably recognize some of them with the common juniper, American hollies, serviceberry, sumacs. Remember, I had that winged sumac before. And then wax myrtle is one of my absolute favorites. It has this, you know, great berry that it produces. The leaves are just beautiful. It fills out to a nice, a dense plant, so it's just filled with birds that find cover in it to build their nest and just you know, make it their home. If you're trying to increase habitat, you know, I've had so much success with adding wax myrtles and these ones that are commercially available fairly easily. So then we talk about trees for birds. And, you know, again, you're going to recognize a lot of names on here with the American beech, the American holly versus the English holly, black gum, you know, black cherry. I mentioned the flowering dogwood. I had a hickory tree in my last yard, which was just, you know, there were always butterflies around it, and it was just, and then when the hickory nuts would fall, you know, it wasn't just the squirrels running off of them, the birds were interested in it too. I talked about how important oaks are, you know, for the insect population, but it's also, you know, a source of food. Red mulberry, I mentioned on that. Now the red maple, here's the, I was driving along and I saw this gorgeous red maple. And I thought, oh, look at that, you know, and I hopped out of my car and took a picture of it, but I decided to walk up to the trunk to see if I could see any animal activity. And what we see here, if you ever see these patterns around the trunk of a tree, these are created by the yellow-bellied sapsucker. And it's a pretty, you know, calculated plan. What they do is they actually drill these holes. They'll start at the bottom, they'll drill a row of holes, and they'll come up and drill the second row above it. I'll use my little mouse here so you can see where I'm pointing. And what happens is they are interested in the sap, so that's one source of food. But what also they're doing, the sap will actually flow into the bottom hole. So these are designed to actually catch the sap, and then ants and other insects will come and feed on the sap. So then the woodpecker comes back and he actually eats the bugs too. So this is just a really cool way that they've created to, you know, enjoy the sap and also the bugs that they can attract by it. It looks like it's going to destroy the tree. I've read you know, as much as I can about this and talked to the experts. Yes, it is possible that this could actually damage a tree to the point where it can't live, but that is really not the norm. Most of the time, you see trees live a long, healthy life with these patterns in it. And I've seen some trees that are just completely riddled with stuff like this. But you know, but this is part of nature's design to allow the sapsucker to do it. And so which did I have here? There we go. Okay, we're going to move on to the next subject, which is leaf litter. I am going to try in the next few minutes to convince you to stop raking your leaves and putting them in bags and sending them away. There are a lot of ground birds that really depend on those leaves to find the food that they're looking for. That's, you know, again, you're starting to increase your habitat. Some things they're looking for besides insects are salamanders, snails, worms and toads. And there's the brown thrasher, the little bug, you can see it in its bill. You know, but you think about the birds that we love, the American robin, that's the brown thrasher there, the dark-eyed junco and white-throated sparrows are winter birds. They're back with us. One of my favorites is the eastern towhee, and one of the very few woodpeckers that is going to go on the ground looking for you know, looking for insects in that leaf litter is the northern flicker, which is just really, really gorgeous woodpecker that you know we would think we might attract by putting suet on the side of the tree, but they want to be on the ground. And here's what they're looking for. You know, they're digging through the leaf litter to find, you know, insects and worms. And I already mentioned the other things too. This is for a bird. This is what they're looking for. So just to make the point again, as we're trying to increase the amount of birds and attract birds to our yard, if you choose to rake up all your leaves, you are actively deciding to cut down the number of birds that you have. This eastern towhee is one of my absolute favorite birds. It has the most beautiful song in the summertime, just this very like sort of fluty, watery sound. And if you kind of tune into it, it makes summer so much better. And without that leaf litter, they will move on to another place where they can have it. So again, trying to create habitat, increase and invite more birds to your yard, leave some leaves out. And just what does that look like? Okay, so this is out my back window. Those are leaves that were raked up under those trees. Sometimes people don't like the look of that. They look like it's unfinished. You can actually get back with your mower and double mow it. That's still fine for the bugs that are going to be in there. But think of the advantages of doing this. You've reduced all the blowers, and I should have mentioned that of these 10 tips, I could have spent an hour on each one of these, and we have to be very careful about how we've been using blowers, which are increasing every year. They're starting to interfere with bird songs. They can't hear each other. You know, as they're blowing, you know, different spores and fungus and actually releasing things that cause diseases and putting those and making them airborne. Blowers are just a really bad idea. Obviously they're convenient, but you know, just by raking just this little bit, we don't have to worry about it. And think about what else would you do? You'd put those in plastic bags and take them off to the landfill. So that's less that you've contributed to our landfill problem. And just from a purely selfish point of view, you've saved yourself some time and money. I mean, once you've done that, you're done. And you now can sit back and enjoy, the white-throated sparrows, and that eastern towhee, and these other birds that are going to just spend all their time down there. No matter how much you're adding feeders and other, and plants and other sources of food, water, and shelter, this leaf litter is going to go a long way to improving the habitat. All right, next subject is dead trees, or also known as snags. And by definition, they're trees that are left upright to decompose. They provide so many important things, starting with shelter. It takes a dead tree for a woodpecker to be able to bore into it. I think it's the red cockaded woodpecker. That's one of the very few that's able to bore into a tree that's fully alive with sap in it. But they're waiting for this to happen. It's a food source. There's a lot of bugs by now that have found their way into it. And maybe not so obvious a benefit, this is a great lookout point for a lot of birds. I mean, you'll see bluebirds sitting at the top with their really great eyesight, looking for movement on the ground. Obviously hawks and owls and other things are going to use it too. Without these snags, that, even if it were tucked in the trees, it doesn't have the leaves on it anymore, provides a really great vantage point for the hunting that they need to do. So this is a snag that I have, and I've left it for, a number of years. I went out and counted it the other day. I have actually 10 holes made by woodpeckers in just this one snag. It's only about maybe 20, we can even as much as 30 feet. But this is a bird condo. This is, where I want to mention that woodpeckers are what are considered a keystone species. We have a lot of birds that rely on woodpeckers to create those cavities. So far, we've identified 85 species in North America that are cavity nesters. And aside from the few that are the woodpeckers, the rest of these actually are waiting for the woodpeckers to move on so they can actually move in there and raise their broods. Starting with eastern bluebird, Carolina wren, then there, of course, there's owls, wood ducks, Carolina chickadees, and just lots and lots of other birds. But those are the common ones that really rely on it. And I'll talk about birdhouses here in a little bit, but what we're basically trying to do is recreate what already occurs in nature even better. So if you have the opportunity to leave one of these snags up in your yard, please do so. This is habitat that we've been taking away from them for a long time, and it's causing some really bad effects. So, if those of you guys drive around Jamestown Island, you recognize our very famous little screech owl. Okay. If somebody decided that tree shouldn't be there anymore because it's dead on the top there, that owl would have lost its habitat. There've been studies about, what about termites? If you keep it a reasonable distance from the house, I'm not sure what that distance is, but if it's off in the woods, down behind your house, it's not going to be something that's going to attract termites that will decide that they're going to march on your house. So this doesn't really, a snag tree does not propose any kind of termite exposure. So if you need to remove a tree, the best time to do this is in late fall. This is something that people don't think a lot about. As they hire tree companies to come out and take down a tree they decide is too dangerous. Think about what's going to happen starting in January. You're going to start having some of these early nesters that are building nests, and then by late winter or spring and in the summer, there's going to be eggs and young birds in there. And if you chop down one of those trees, you will, if you love birds, you're going to feel horrible to find the fact that you just destroyed these nests. It's a fairly short window. It's really between now and the end of the year. So if you have to take a tree down, and again, I'm going to say, try to find any reason you possibly can to keep that snag up there. This is the one and only time really to consider doing it. So moving on to water, obviously water is one of those, basics to creating a successful habitat, because the birds drink it every day, but they also use it to clean their plumage, and they are used to remove parasites. It is a health issue for them too. So there are lots of strategies for adding a water feature to your yard. There's a lot of information on this slide. Sorry, I probably should have broken this up into a couple of them, but they all kind of seem to pertain to the feeder that we're looking at on the right-hand side. Basically, I don't know, this may be my term. You're trying to create a clean puddle. Okay, this is where the birds feel most comfortable, because if they're going to find water like this, it's going to be a puddle on the ground. But now you've actually put it in a container that you can actually maintain and keep clean. One thing that people tend to get in trouble with is they want to add more water to their bird bath because either they don't want to fill it so much, they think more water means more birds. It absolutely doesn't. You'd be surprised how shallow these should be. 1.5 inches to 2 inches, no more than 2 inches. In fact, you get up to 2, you're going to start losing birds. They just don't feel comfortable going in it. I didn't put it here, but the thing that a good feature, if you're going to put a bird bath out, make sure it has a pretty decent grip on the side of it too, and you can feel that with your hand. A good strategy is put it in the shade. Bird baths tend to do better in the shade. They don't heat up so much. Things don't grow in them so quickly. So just find a place that has some shade during part of the year. And keeping the bird bath clean is really key to being successful. So it doesn't take a lot. I'll show you my cleaning kit here in a minute, but basically no more than once a week, and usually more than that. I'll go out, I'll just dump it out. I have a little pitcher of water ready to go. I've got a thing of Clorox wipes. I wipe it out and scrub it as best I can. I bring a brush in case it's gotten a little worse. But if you stay on it, this only takes like a minute or two. And then I rinse it a couple times with fresh water, and then I put it back on, and the birds really appreciate it. You will get way more birds on a clean bird feeder. Think about the material that you're going to use. I prefer plastic or what's called clay fiber, because when it gets cold in the winter, it won't crack. There are actually heaters you can add. I still wouldn't put a heater on a glass or or ceramic bird bath because I'm not sure you can even keep up with it. But the reason why you're going to add a heater is so there actually is some moving water in there. Speaking of moving water, a dripper is a really important thing to consider adding. A lot of people don't. They usually stop at the bird bath, but you're going to have a lot of fun if you put a dripper on there. Because it tells the birds that there's water in there. It keeps the water fresher. I have a dripper that has a little hook to it, and it's so much fun to watch the goldfinches hang upside down and drink from it like it's a little water fountain. So that's something else to consider, and I'm going to show you my setup for that here too. But before I get to that, this is, I mean, as plain as this is, in my mind, this is an ideal bird bath in so many ways. It's plastic, it's not going to crack. I put my little measuring tape in there. At the very, very deepest point, it's 1 inch. But these things tend to, it's really hard to always get them straight. So there's always a little tilt. So honestly, they could just walk in this thing and it'll still be, shallow and just get to where they feel comfortable. It's, as I said, very easy to clean. It's made of plastic, so it's not going to crack in the wintertime. And of course, I had to, not meaning to, but I kind of put it through the test. On the left-hand side there, you can see where I left it out. And this was the first week of December. You know how weather here changes fast. And I came out the next morning, the thing had been dripping, and I created my own little, very cool stalagmite out of water that came out there. I thought it was fun. So at that point, it was time to take the dripper off for the season, and then put the heater in there. And then just go back to just visiting it to take the water out and replace it. So what I came up with was to actually use a rain barrel to constantly have fresh water in my bird bath. It will drip over the sides, but it's dripping only once every 2 or 3 seconds, so it's not causing a great mess. And like that dripper made more difference than anything else. And you can see I keep it fairly close to the house too, so I can run the power cord out there with my heater. A lot of people tend to want to put their bird baths out in the middle of their yard. My point is always put it near the window. You'll enjoy it. What I found is you'll enjoy it just as much as if it's stuck out in the middle of the yard. Anyway, this is a great system. This worked perfectly for me. And since we moved, I have it kind of all in storage. I can't wait to set it up again because I loved every bit of having the rain barrel kind of flow into the bird bath. So moving on to, as we're finding things to add that, that we're not planting, we're creating, feeders really comes up as a kind of a big topic. And this may be one of the hardest facts for you to accept, but birds only get 10 to 25% of their food from bird feeders, and that's it. Okay, I know there are people out there, and I was one of those for years that thought, oh, my birds, they're eating off my feeders. They really, really depend on me. No more than 25%. I mean, consider the feed that you put in your bird feeders. It's a snack. It's not a meal. And it actually, somebody explained it to me even better. They say, imagine a high school a hallway, and then there's a vending machine. Okay, and then the high school kids are going by and getting stuff out of the vending machine. Well, yeah, I mean, it's good and they need it and they're hungry, but you want it to be healthy snacks, and you want it to be give them the energy that they need. So these really are bird vending machines, and you can see the picture on the left, or sorry, on the right, just how active they can be. Now, the times they seem to be the most helpful is in the winter when it's scarce. You can see there's snow on the ground, and so these finches were all over my feeder, because they already knew it was there too. Okay, but they continue to visit the feeder in pretty large numbers through spring and summer because they have a high energy need when they're building nests, they're raising their brood. If they don't have a lot of time to go out hunting or looking for food, but they know where those feeders are. So I find that the most active feeding seasons are really from right now, where we just started into it, really through the end of summer, which I think surprises people. A lot of people think they're as winter feeders, but you'd be surprised how hard birds will continue to hit those feeders in the summertime for those reasons. So a little bit about, kind of bird strategy. There's my dog, Timmy. He's in there for scale. Whenever he's out there, the birds, they'll eventually come back. They get used to him, but, he likes to hang out where the birds are. There's I'm going to keep coming back to this. Please keep it clean. The recommendation is a 10% bleach solution. Either you can soak it in it, or you can put it in a spray bottle and scrub it. You're gonna have to do that a few more times to kind of make it effective. But then a lot of people put their bird feeders out in the middle of the yard, and that's not going to work either, because birds need to feel comfortable dashing in and out of their cover that you've already provided. Remember, back to those native plants. So if you can get your feeder within 10 feet of a big thick bush, like, think about those wax myrtles or something else like that, you're going to have a lot more birds visiting your feeder, a lot more birds that just feel comfortable just living in your yard and actually building nests and sticking around. There's a kind of a tricky thing with windows. Birds, and we'll talk about window strikes here in a minute. When you have a window feeder that's inside of 3 feet of the window, it's actually considered pretty safe, because if a bird gets spooked and he flies away, the problem with the windows, they look at the reflection, they think it's a continuation of the outdoors. If it's under 3 feet, they don't seem to have enough time to build up speed that they can hurt themselves. So that's considered a safe distance. But then you have to now push it out. So between 3 and 10 feet. That's where we really consider it's just a lot more dangerous, because again, if a bird gets spooked by something, he'll turn around and fly towards what he thinks is more woods, but it's your window, and they can build up enough speed to really hurt themselves. So think about putting it inside of 3 feet of a window or beyond 10 feet. I hope that's clear. It's a little hard to explain. I also look for a feeder that's easy to clean. Every one of the feeders that you see out here is super easy to clean. I'm going to show you, what I mean by that. If you're looking for variety, offer a variety of feeders, and also the food, whether it's suet or different types of seed, because you are trying to attract different birds. Remember, the name of the talk is how to attract more birds to your yard. It's not just it's your numbers, but it's also exciting to see, birds that we don't usually get to see. And, it's not just the seed, but it's the delivery of the seed where you can do it. This seems like an obvious thing, but I'm surprised how many people don't really think this went through. Mount the feeders where you can see them best, and that may take sometimes 2 people, 1 person out in the yard, moving that pole around, and then sitting like where you think you're going to be sitting most of the time watching it. And don't be afraid to move it again. So if you move it 2-3 feet one way or the other, it's not like the birds aren't going to find it. They'll definitely get back to it. They're foraging birds, but put it where you can enjoy it the most. Okay. So what does a feeding kit look like? First of all, in the wintertime, it's recommended you clean your feeders once a month. In the summertime, it's every 2 weeks. Hummingbird feeders, you got to swap that nectar out every 3 to 4 days. I will tell you, if you stay on top of this, it goes very, very fast. The longest part is if you're going to soak the feeders in a bleach solution. Sometimes you can't get them all in there, and that's where those sprays with the 10% bleach solution come in. But I look for feeders that I can actually take apart and clean. So also in my kit, it can all actually be packed into one. So we see gloves. I use that so my hands don't smell like bleach for the next 24 hours. I've got bleach, but I've got those Clorox bleach wipes, some soap and brushes. One of those tubs actually is to mix the bleach solution, the 10% bleach solution. So I have that ready to go. And the other one just holds everything. Now, I only keep the bleach going in the summer months. In the winter, I'm still willing to make it up once at a time. But it's nice that everything fits in my one little bin, and then that bin goes in the other one. You can spend a lot of money on bins, or you can go to Restore. Restore always has bins for sale for about $2 a piece. You do not have to spend a lot of money on this. The stuff that you see inside there will actually get me through fully through one season, if not more, because I'm careful how I measure it out and use it. This does not have to be a big thing. Does not have to be a long operation. But this, and besides the fact that you're eliminating a lot of diseases that birds can possibly give to each other as they concentrate on the feeders, you're just going to get more birds. The cleaner your feeders are, the more birds you're going to get. One analogy I like to use is, birds are our guests. A lot of these are migrating birds. They're only here for a few months of the year. We want to treat them like guests. And if you had guests come to your house, you wouldn't feed them on dirty plates. So we shouldn't do the same thing with our birds. Feed them on as clean a surface as we can possibly offer. So, once you've got your feeders, you got to decide what you're going to put in them. There are good seeds and there are bad seeds. And I don't want to, get too much in this, but I'll just run them down. And in that graphic in the middle is very helpful. This is also by Cornell to show us, that different birds eat different things. Like on the bottom, there's the woodpeckers love their suet. I have a particular love affair with blue jays, and I know that they will go bananas for those peanuts that are in the shell. Most of the way up on the left-hand side, we think mealworms when we think of bluebirds. There's the cardinal. The cardinal's going to eat the seeds that have the harder shell on them because they're willing to do it. And you'll see some overlap, like the nuthatch, that he's an upside-down feeder. He's going to eat seed and suet. So anyway, this gives you some idea. You can find this on their website. You have it here, and it gives you kind of a good starter. and it's actually very, if you just knew nothing about what you're seeing here, and you went into a store that sold seed, you could get what you wanted, depending on the kind of bird you're going to try to attract. But if you look at the list on the left-hand side, sunflower chips or sunflower seeds without the shells, that is, in my opinion, the number one thing you can put out in bird seed. It eliminates the effort of having to pop the shell off. They love it. It flows through the feeder easily. You're not paying for shells, and it's just and everybody eats it, including that bluebird. He's not a seed eater. He's going to spend his time looking for bugs, but because his beak's not strong enough to pop a shell. But sunflower chips and no shell, you will find them eating sunflower chips too. Second only to that would be just black oil sunflower. That's the black seed with that has the sunflower meat still inside of it. Moving down, you can see tree nuts. There's all sorts of suet you can get. Mealworms, we talked about that. You can get dried ones and live ones. One of my friends is so funny. She has a really hard time with any kind of mealworm. She finally got over it when she realized mealworms were just French fries for birds. So I think that's helped her. White safflower is a very common seed. It's great for birds that have a stronger beak, like the cardinal's got that finch beak, so it can pop it open. But if you're trying to cut back on the red-winged blackbirds that tend to hit us in the wintertime, they have a harder time with it. Peanuts in and out of the shell are very popular. Fruit, again, now you're looking for, the Orioles, but there are some other fruit-eating birds that are out there too. Niger is this little black seed that actually is a real favorite of the goldfinches. I would only use that in the wintertime. It's hard to keep that fresh. And then white millet, that's a seed that you'll see a lot in feeders. I don't consider that a bad seed because I know that the white-throated sparrows and the mourning doves and a lot of others really like it there. But here's the list on the right-hand side that I would strongly suggest you avoid. The easy way to do this is pick up a bag of seed and look at the ingredients. It's the same way if you at a grocery store and you're looking to see what ingredients are in what you're buying. Bird seeds do the same thing, and they put the highest percentage thing at the top, just like they do with our human food. So if you see oats, and just run the other way. But birds don't eat oats. It is something put in there to make that bag weigh more. And it's something they're just going to throw out. And for the most part, they'll throw out the red and white milo too. There are a couple of birds that will pick at it, but it is considered just absolute filler. Corn, that's a little more confusing. There are some birds that will like corn, but by and large, most birds won't. And it's not even really that nutritious a seed for them. There's so much canary seed in the pet market. They decided to throw it into the wild bird market too. It is not for wild birds. They don't really know what to do with it, so they'll throw it away too. And then a couple crazy things like rice and flax. I throw in here at the end old stale black oil. This is a little harder to understand, but you'll see sales where these big bags of black oil seed are offered. What I would encourage you to do, this little bit of homework, look at what you're looking at is the fat and the protein content, and the older the black oil, the more that number goes down. Whereas you buy the really good premium stuff, it is such more nutritious a seed. And what you're going to find, a lot of birds, they're going to pick up this old black oil, they're going to hold it, and they're going to kind of wait. They literally are trying to evaluate, like, its density, does it feel like it's got enough in it? And if it's not, they just fling it over their shoulder. So a lot of old black oil gets tossed that way too. To talk just a little bit about the feeders themselves. There are, two ways to think about when you're trying to feed the birds. One is the food that you're putting out there, and then the method of delivery. We're going to just touch on platforms, hoppers, tube, suet feeders, cages around feeders, window feeders, and the nectar, and think hummingbirds when you think that. So a platform feeder is just what it sounds like. It's an open feeder that you can actually just dump seed in, or what I do, you can see there's a little dish in there. I like to use my platform feeder for trying other things. If I want to do jelly, I might just smear some of that in there and put it inside, or you can just again just dump seed in the bottom of it and see what happens. Extremely versatile feeder. I like these feeders because birds that tend to be more skittish are more inclined to come to an open feeder like that. So those are platform feeders. So hopper feeders these are the ones that have been around for years and years and years. They look like little houses. You flip the roof open and you dump the seed in, and then it flows out the bottom. This one, you get the benefit of actually these suet cages on the side, so you can actually have suet and seed going at the same time. I like this one because it's easy to clean. Go back to just for a sec, go back to this one. That is just one piece. If you wanted to, you could actually just throw the thing, once you clean it, throw it in the 10% bleach solution. Or if you want to spray it out, you can. This one, you're gonna have to do a little bit of spraying around it. But see that tray at the bottom? That's where a lot of it gets gross, and I can just toss that in too. So from the left to the right, look how much I can actually disassemble this feeder to clean it. It makes my job a lot easier, and I get through it a lot faster too. So first, what looks complicated actually really speeds up your time. One of my favorite feeders is the Squirrel Buster series. They are considered tube feeders, and you can see there's a tube that you just pour the seed into. The design here is that they're spring loaded, so if a squirrel gets anywhere on the top, middle, or bottom, it's enough weight to pull the cage down, and they can't get to the seed. One of my also favorite things about these feeders is look how simple they are. There are only 3 pieces. And so there's no more disassembly, and they're easy to clean all the way around. In this case, what I usually do is I try to clean as best I can, then I put in the bleach solution just as kind of the last step, and it comes out looking brand new. So yeah, big fan of those. And just another thing about these feeders, if you look at the perches at the bottom, those are fairly long perches. Cardinals are not the most coordinated bird in the world. And so you need a more substantial perch for a cardinal and even a mockingbird. So if you start making things harder with just like a little post coming off a feeder, you're going to start eliminating birds. And I have always been of the philosophy, I want as many birds and different birds as I can for the feeders that I'm putting out. So if we're going to talk about feeders, we really need to spend at least a moment talking about squirrels. Squirrels are a worthy adversary, and there are things we can do to keep the squirrels off our feeder. And there have been a lot of people who spent a lot of time thinking about this. This is one of my favorite books. But one of the kind of philosophies that's come out is to follow the 3-7-9 rule. This has to do with feet. So a squirrel can jump 5 feet straight up. So if you're going to put a baffle on a pole, or you're going to put the feeder high up that you don't think they can get to it, if it's any other 5 feet, you'd be surprised how they could just make that jump. Now they can also jump 7 feet horizontally. So if you have 2 different places, one for them to take off and land, they will actually very much try to do that. then they are willing to make a 9-foot drop. So think about looking above your feeder. If there's something that's 9 feet, the squirrel actually may very well try to go for it. So I don't know how many of you guys have seen these videos out there. These are so great. Former national engineer Mark Rober has made these engineering videos. He decided to take on squirrels, and he's actually had a couple different mazes that he's created. One more recently, but these are about 20 minutes long. And if you haven't seen them, I guarantee these are 20 of the most entertaining minutes you'll spend in your life. He goes through and builds these really elaborate obstacle courses that the squirrels do figure out, and they're handsomely rewarded at the end. Love these. And anyway, strongly recommend going to Mark Rober's Facebook page and just enjoying all the work that he and then ultimately the squirrels go through to get where they need to go. I'll talk about baffles. Those are things you put on the pole to keep them from with the squirrels getting to them, and a little bit longer ones, then you're going to be able to keep the raccoons off of it too. So the two main types, the one on the left is a skirt or the cone baffle, and that's just a physical barrier. They have a hard time kind of reaching around it and getting a grip. The one on the left is what we call the torpedo or stovepipe baffle. And the philosophy there is they're too small to get their little feet around it to get enough traction to climb up it. So they kind of stay away. Again, these photos are a little misleading because I was taking it from above, but all those are 5 feet. They're above the baffle. So don't hang the baffle and then hang things below it, because they're gonna, again, you're under 5 feet and they're gonna find their way in. Talk about cage feeders a little bit. You have to make sure that the opening is less than 1.5 inches, or a squirrel's going to squeeze through there. I'm not as big a fan of cage feeders because they eliminate some of the larger and more skittish birds that can't squeeze through there or just don't feel comfortable doing it. I find them a little harder to clean, and I'm just not a cage bird feeder because I think they're just a little bit aesthetically less appealing, because now you've been hanging a cage in your yard. But this one I think has a little more style to it. Being that it's round, but they are very successful, and people that like to feed their birds, will do nothing but cage feeders. Just touch on one more, window feeders. We talk about window strikes, and the first thought is, if you put a feeder on your window, are you increasing the chances that they're going to strike your window? You're actually doing the opposite. You're telling the bird that that's not a continuation of the woods that he's been looking at, and so they won't continue flying into it. The things I look for in a window feeder are quality suction cups, because the last thing you want is this thing popping off the window a couple weeks after you put it on. A little tip that I didn't put in here: try to put a little tiny bit of cooking oil on the suction cups before you put it on, and let it sit for about an hour. It tends to kind of like set it really well, and then it'll stay on there as long as you want. I like a window feeder that's easy to clean, that has removing parts. And that's what this one is too. And I mentioned already how safe they are. This is a trick that I came up with. I read about this online. I wanted to attract birds to a window feeder that was really not. It was kind of tucked in on my deck, in the corner. I'd rather if you actually attach a piece of foil to the top of it, birds are curious. They'll see it flipping, and they'll come check it out. And it worked like a charm. I mean, I had birds on the feeder within the first day or two. Unfortunately, they don't make this feeder anymore. They call it the Window Cafe. So you can see there were mealworms on the left, and sunflower chips on the right. I love this feeder for just so many different ways. Again, it never popped off the wall or the glass, and it was incredibly easy to clean. So here's a lot of information on one sheet, but I just want to kind of keep it all together about hummingbird feeders. There are two basic styles. There's the dish style at the top, and then there's what's called the bottle style at the bottom. I will tell you right away, you can already hear my bias, that I think the dish style at the top is so much better than the one at the bottom. But that's just me, and that's really more from a user point of view. As far as the hummingbirds are concerned, they're just as happy to go to either one of them. They're equally effective. But the reason why I like the dish style is because it only has two parts. You pop that red part off the top, and then you have that clear part at the bottom. It's really easy to clean. If you start getting to clean the bottle style at the bottom with those little flowers, you got to take those flowers out, and there's actually several parts to it. It takes a lot of work to get it, as clean as what you could have done in just a couple of minutes with the one on top. There's a lot of confusion as to what to put into a hummingbird feeder. I will tell you as simply as I can. It's 4 parts tap water, 1 part cane sugar. So imagine putting 4 cups of water on your counter and then put a 5th cup of sugar and mix it all into some sort of jug. That's the ratio. And people try to convince you of all sorts of things, like that you need to boil the water, that you need to add red dye to the water, that you need to do this and do that. I will tell you, having talked to all the experts, you do not have to do any of that stuff. You may want, if you want to boil the water to just make the sugar dissolve easier, that's on you. But by the time you get the water boiled, if you've been shaking it, and so one of these, like, these water contain, like quart water containers, you already got it mixed up. But again, there are a lot of people with really strong opinions. But I've talked to the experts on this, and that this is, and again, it's cane sugar. Don't do any fancy sugar. Don't add weird stuff to it. I'm not going to mention. I don't want to even give you ideas. Make it as simple as you possibly can, but do clean it every 3 to 4 days. There's a product called Feeder Fresh that you can add to the once it's in the feeder, just a few drops of it, and it's copper sulfate, which is a food preservative. And this was developed by some zoos that actually had hummingbird enclosures, and they were finding this was extending the food that they were putting out. Also, another way to extend it is to put your hummingbird feeder in the shade. This is sugar water, and it definitely does better if it's not in direct sunlight, and the hummingbirds are still going to find it just as easy. Another strategy is maybe just try to put out 2 feeders, because if you just have the one out there, those of you that have had hummingbirds, you know how much they bicker with each other. 2 gives them at least a chance to kind of just have their own. Another thing, remember I was mentioning that birds only, it's 10 to 25% of their diet. Well, possibly even less for hummingbirds. Hummingbirds, they drink the nectar, and this is not necessarily their primary food. What they're doing is they're just actually getting energy to go off and hunt bugs. You can think of this as their monster drink, their Red Bull, whatever you want to think of it. Their cup of coffee in the morning. This gives them the energy to go off and eat the bugs that they're really looking for. So again, back to the whole thing we've been talking about. If you increase the bugs that are in your backyard, you're going to have more hummingbirds. And weirdly enough, there are, and I'll talk about this on the next page, but there are so many more hummingbirds out in the neighboring counties than there are here in Williamsburg and James City County, because we've been spraying so many pesticides. We've knocked down our bird population so much that we have done this to ourselves. But I have friends that live over in Surrey that their hummingbird feeders are just covered in hummingbirds. Here's kind of a cool little trick this holiday season. If somebody gives you a present with a big red bow, set it aside, hang it out like around the last week of March. Maybe, that's probably good enough. And put your feeder out there. The hummingbirds are migrating birds, and as they're zipping back across and looking down, they'll see that big red bow, and they might think this might be the perfect place to come and build a nest. I did this past year, and I was surprised by just how much the hummingbird population increased where I live. I mean, it went up by, I could say, as much as 100%. It was just a fun trick that somebody had told me about, and I gave it a try. So try and put that red bow somewhere near where your feeder is too. So it looks like just this huge flower from the sky as they're migrating north. So we're talking about nest boxes a little bit, or birdhouses, and we're talking about location, material design. And you have to remember, these are only for cavity nesters. You'll never get a robin that's going to want to nest in a bluebird box, because they build, or a cardinal, they build their nests in trees. But so, remember those 85 species, these are the ones that we're thinking about. And a lot of these are using what were once woodpecker holes too. So another way around this, of course, is keep that snag in your yard. Here's some strategies for your bluebird nest box. And the reason why I still focus on bluebird nest boxes is because there's a lot of other birds that will use the same exact house. So you get a lot of extra kind of bang for your buck. And I just jumped to the bottom of the list. That's Carolina wrens, Carolina chickadees, the tufted titmouse, the tree swallow, great crested flycatcher, house finches, although they'll nest in like your flower plants just as easy too. And then the prothonotary warbler. But some of these have more hole specific sizes. For example, if you just want wrens, don't make the hole 1.5 inches that we'll talk about later. Make it more like 1 1/8 inches. They like a little bit smaller hole. First thing is keep that feeder away from, keep the birdhouse away from the feeder. A lot of people tend to like say, this is where I'm doing my birding. And so they put the feeders out and then just right next to it, they set that birdhouse. It's just too much activity there. Move it as far away as you can in your yard. And then, you know, if you're facing that hole out, remember these guys are looking for bugs. So face it out towards the open. There have been some studies that if you have some choices, there is a preference that starting with east, then north and south, and then lastly west. I found that putting it with a little bit of shade is actually better. As we get into the summer, that shade is really appreciated to keep the temperature down inside the house. Now, we talked about space in the beginning as a function of habitat. They want to have 300 feet between their next box, which is that's a lot, okay? And so what you need are, you know, as Judith was saying, that's a football field. So, you know, you may not have a yard that big. So what you want to do is you want to look around and you want to make sure that if you have one on one side of your fence, you don't just peek across the fence and see the other one there. There's a trick you can do by putting a bluebird box in your backyard and putting one in the front yard out of line of sight. I've actually had really good success with that too. You can hang these about eye level. Please put these on a pole and put a baffle on them to keep the squirrels and raccoons out. Don't put it on the fence. You are just asking for predators to come in there, especially things like snakes. Now, we think about bluebirds as only used in these houses in the springtime, but I will tell you this photo was taken almost to the day 3 years ago in November. I had this nesting pair that decided they wanted to just play house for a week in my bluebird house. So they were in there, in and out every single day. I started to wonder what they were really doing, if they weirdly were thinking about a nest, but you know, because there was that much activity. But no, they were just checking it out. They continued to come back over the winter to use it for roosting during the colder colder days. They felt so comfortable by using it by springtime. They actually started building their nest on February 4th, and we had eggs by February 28th, which is a little early, but they did survive. But yeah, so there's really not a bad time to put out a nest box because obviously these two are using it right now here in November. Okay, as far as design, you know, there's some things that make a bluebird house better. We who build bluebird houses for the different bluebird trails and volunteer projects, we like to follow the Carl Little bluebird box design. Carl Little is from here on the East Coast, who's built tons of these, and so those are the plans there on the right hand side. But I'm going to show you what the house actually looks like. But before I get to it, I want to show you how we got these. You know, I am a master gardener intern, almost to be. Yeah, I got a few minutes left till I'm official. But you know, I've been a master gardener for years, and so this is a project that I coordinated for our picnic this year. I thought it'd be fun for us to build a bunch of these bluebird nest boxes. So there we are on picnic day as one of our service activities, just to have some fun. And this is the one that I built. The first thing you may notice that we haven't talked about is that big metal mesh on the front of it. That's a snake guard, and we'll come back to that. But let's look inside and see the features. So, you know, 1.5 inch hole is kind of the magic number for a bluebird. But then you have, you know, a chamber that should be 5 by 5 inches roughly. You want that hole 6 inches above the floor, just so there's the right room for the nest. Those little lines that are carved there, that's actually a little fledgling ladder. Not so much for bluebirds, but if you have tree swallows that are trying to climb out of it, they tend to really appreciate that. There's lots of ventilation everywhere. You know, you want to keep these cool in the summertime. This is cedar, and it's fairly thick cedar, so it's actually going to hold the insulation pretty well. And then we look for drainage too. Now, obviously, a sloping roof, so the water has a quick way to get off. Starting with the ventilation, once the door is closed, that is an open gap right there, and you can see an even opening above the door. I flip it over, that's all for drainage. Again, that's enough to even provide some ventilation too. If we look at the screen that's on the front there, it's this metal mesh that we bent and attached to the front. Now, the last thing we do is we bend those little metal needles, the metal pins aside. Snakes hate that. So this is a way to keep the snakes from crawling over it to get into it. These are very effective. And again, if you look at the ones that are on the Colonial Parkway that I showed you in the beginning, they all have these on there to keep the snakes out. And then there's the stovepipe baffle to keep raccoons and squirrels from causing mayhem from the bottom. So we do everything we can to keep these bluebird houses so that they're safe out there where they are. So I don't have snakes in my backyard, but I have issues with European house sparrows. One year they got in there, and they actually one got in there and murdered all the chicks that were within a couple days of fledging, which was just devastating to our family. And so of course we cleaned it out, but the house sparrow kept coming back and poking his head out, claiming this as his own. So I started reading about what I could do, and I read that actually house sparrows really hate flying through string. So I actually hung some fishing line down, weighted with washers, and I used duct tape because that works for everything. And the sparrow couldn't stand it. He flew away and never came back. And I have a stain box in the front yard, as I may have mentioned before. If you keep them out of line of sight, you can actually kind of cheat and get it well inside that 300 feet. So anyway, so this is a good strategy if you have house sparrows. Those of you that live in town, I know that if you live anywhere near Merchant Square, there are so many house sparrows there. This is something you may consider doing to make sure they don't get in there, because it is heartbreaking to see when they do this. Next subject is cats. This is pretty obvious. This is our cat, our indoor cat. She's never been outside. I'm not sure she would even know what to do if she stepped outside now. Her name's Mistletoe. We call her Missy. And cats are just terrible for birds. Remember to talk about that 2.9 million birds that are lost. Well, let's look at what we have here. 2.6 billion birds, and these are low estimates, each year in North America are killed by birds. Direct your attention to the right-hand side, to that graph. You don't have to read all those little numbers. You can go back if you're renting, if you're downloading it. You can see that all the other contributing factors don't come close to what cats are doing. But, to be honest with you, it's about 69% feral cats, which is, kind of that's animal control. That's something that we can get involved with. But that still leaves 31% that are pet cats. These are cats that have names and collars, and they are out there, and their owners are actively allowing them to go out there and kill birds because they think that's part of what they should do, or part of their just natural instinct, but it is not. Again, these are non-native predators we've introduced. If you don't need enough convincing, outdoor cats live only about half as long as indoor cats because they get exposed to toxoplasmosis, rabies, forms of feline leukemia. Those of you that have had cats, they start developing these mysterious diseases, way younger than they should if they've been outside, and it wears them down. So if you love your cat and you want to have it around for twice as long, there's an easy solution: keep it indoors. And that's not to say your cats won't still enjoy the birds, although they do get used to it after a little while. This is in both cases, kind of the early days of putting the feeders up. So of course, my cat on the right, she's all talk. She would, she never even kills the bugs that are in the house. So, but this is this is something we can do. We can't always control the neighborhood stray cats. Well, I guess in the one sense we can if we spay and neuter our cat, that we're not contributing possibly to that stray cat population. Keep your feeders and bird baths a little bit elevated. If you keep them on the ground and even near a bush, you're going to actually create an ambush zone for the cats. So just try to remember if you were a cat, because they're really good hunters. They can sit inside, wait for the bird to come, and it's just over in a second. I want to touch on windows for a second. Again, we were talking in billions, and again, these are low estimates from all the things I was reading. 1 billion bird strikes a year. Okay, and again, it's a similar thing. My first thought was, well, must be these big glass skyscrapers with migrating birds, and there certainly is some of that, but they're estimating more than half are residential windows, just like the ones you can see. This is the back of our condo. So what we need to do is come up with some strategies. I think it's interesting that there are some birds that are more prone to window strikes than others, like the dark-eyed junco, ovenbird, song sparrow, white-throated sparrow, the gray catbird, and I was even surprised at the ruby-throated hummingbird on there, and the yellow-bellied sapsucker. They are they're the birds that we see most, but they're obviously, you may see a cardinal or a Carolina wren. But those are the birds that they've, with studies they've noticed. Seeing a window is kind of a learned activity. It's not something you're born knowing what a window looks like. And it is hard with any kind of visual cues to know whether it's a window or not. So I went to a parking lot. I took 2 pictures. One picture, I just shot the picture straight out. And the other picture, I actually, used the reflection in the window. And if you look really carefully, you can notice the one on the left is the reflection. But think about those poor birds. They're, trying to fly. They see those trees. They think that's, part of where they're headed, and they crash into the window. So there are some strategies. Again, here's one of the slides with a bunch of information on it. I already touched on the fact that you want to try to keep your feeders inside 3 feet, which is why window feeders are so great, or just put it past 10 feet. Leave the screens in the window. The number one thing you can do to protect your birds from hitting the window is leave those screens. That seems to be enough of a visual cue to them. They know that that's not someplace they need to be flying to. Don't put plants in your windows. They see vegetation. They start thinking that might be a place they can fly into. If you want to try to paint stripes on the window, and this is something that people certainly do when they have a lot of issues, you're going to have to go through and put those lines pretty close together, starting with and people paint with soap, or then also I've heard tempera paint. So from ceiling to floor, they're going to start with these stripes every 4 inches, and then they're going to come back with the same paint, and they're going to go 2 inches, then go 2 inches above that. So you have a pretty substantial grid on your window. People also use decals, stickers, and sun catchers. Just anything else that you can stick on the window that tells the bird it is not, part of the woods he's looking for. And a lot of these work. Try to get those on the outside. They work a lot better there than they do on the inside. I don't know if it's good or bad news, but about 50% of the birds will recover from a bird strike. And here's the strategy that I was told by the rehabbers that we're going to talk about in a second. If it is safe and it seems to be aware and it's just sitting there, let it be. Don't touch it. Don't try to rescue it. It may just need to kind of collect itself and it will fly away. And that's very often what happens. If you find the bird unconscious but still alive, their recommendation is put it into a shoebox with a top on it. Maybe put some paper towels there to keep it comfortable. Holes in the top so it's there's air in there. In a quiet place for an hour. Take the box outside. Open the box. If the bird flies away, everything was great. If it is still injured, it's time to call a rehabber. We have a wonderful rehab organization based in Richmond, but they also have a kind of a place in New Kent County, which is about 20 minutes from here, called Aware, and that's Deb Woodward's number. It's and again, you'll get this as in the recording, 804-467-8156. Either you can bring the bird to Deb, or Deb will come get it. They have wonderful treatments for bird strikes. They have had a pretty good success rate with it. So even if you have a bird strike, all is not lost. But the best strategy is to try to avoid it just from the start. So we're getting near the end. Pesticides are just causing so much problem. And back to the very beginning, we think about birds eating seeds, but boy, do they eat a lot of bugs. And we are trying to get bugs back into our gardens. Pesticides are non-specific. They don't care. They're going to kill your caterpillars, butterflies, just as much as your Japanese beetles. What we have found is that people that have hummingbird feeders out in the country have way more hummingbirds than we're seeing in like James City County and City of Williamsburg, because they don't use the pesticides like we do. Okay, I'm going to suggest some alternate methods. And sometimes it comes down to just going out there and picking them yourselves. One of our master gardener projects this summer was to go every morning and just with gloves squish the Japanese beetles on the plants. So sometimes you just have to do it by hand. And birds are really counting on us. I mean, we are going to have to change how we use our pesticides to get there. We use over 1 billion pounds of pesticides. Most of our in a category called neonicotinoids. I finally got through that. And that's a very common pesticide used in agriculture and in people's yards and on pets. It's turning out to be more lethal to birds and insects than they thought. There have been studies by the EPA even as recent as last year, so we have to keep an eye on that. Roundup, which is a herbicide, is also toxic to birds, and by the way, us too. And if you need some convincing, back to the year 1970, if you went for a country drive, think about like when you got back home, how many birds were squished on your windshield. And that was through the 70s and 80s. If you went for a drive, your windshield was just covered in bugs. We don't see that anymore. Obviously, something's happened, and we can really point to pesticides for a big reason why this has happened. And it starts at home, and we could start right here and absolutely make a difference. Again, because a lot of these pesticides are residential. Be careful of organic pesticides. A lot of them use something called neem oil from the neem tree in India. It is a natural, I guess, in the sense that the neem tree produces it, pesticide to keep as a protection for the plants. It suffocates the caterpillars, and that's all caterpillars and other insects. It also causes growth inhibition, and it stops them from feeding, and it will sterilize them too. And even in their ad, you can see caterpillars is listed. So be careful when you see something that says organic, because it is still going after the bugs that you are trying to protect. So what do you do? One of the most effective and greenest ones is diatomaceous earth. This is something you can buy, hardware stores, and you may be a little nervous to use it the first time. It's like, what is this? It's fossilized remains of aquatic organisms, and it does a bunch of things. Now, I would not go spraying this on your plants because it'll hurt your caterpillars and other soft-bodied insects. But what you do is you actually use this to protect bugs from coming inside your door. You spray it around the bottom of your doors, around your windows. And the bugs, they don't cross it. What happens is it kind of puffs out as the dust. It gets absorbed into their exoskeleton, and it dries them out, and they die. It's considered completely harmless to birds and fish, and really to us too. So you see, this is food grade over here. And so this is a great one to use as a barrier to keep bugs from coming inside the house. Again, and you've heard me say this so many times already, we are trying to increase the bugs that we have in our backyard. If you want to keep the bugs from coming inside, this is a great way to do it, and it's not going to hurt. It's not going to hurt the birds, and as long as the bugs don't cross it, like I say, if a caterpillar crosses it, it's not going to be good for him. But for the most part, you're just trying to keep other things from coming in, like ants and whatnot. If you have to use a pesticide that's spray, Michigan State University recommends using insecticidal soaps very carefully. These actually should be applied very first thing in the morning or at the very end of the day, so they're dry by the time the pollinators come. Now, this is not great if you're going to have caterpillars on the plant. That's not going to work. But if you have these nectar plants and you want to put something on there, that will actually be okay. And the way it works, it disrupts their soft membrane. Again, this is why we're talking about the softer insects. Again, be very careful with this. So there was, something else that occurred to me, that you can go out and buy these little tubs of insects. So it feels like, well, they're insects, so let them have at it. There's some real problems here too that you should be aware of. And, honestly, if you've been doing all the other things that, with leaf litter and native plants that are hosts, that provide food for the bugs, and then the birds coming and doing their part, you're going to you're going to create the balance that you need without having to introduce these guys. Ladybugs seem like kind of an obvious choice because we have them here, but oftentimes they're not raised in the cleanest way, and they can introduce diseases to the ladybug populations that's already there, because remember, these guys will fly away. The other one people try to use are praying mantises, but they use the Chinese praying mantis, which is a non-native species. And I don't know, whenever you introduce a non-native, you're introducing a whole set of variables and problems. It's just not worth doing. So I would avoid those. Here's the last thing: get involved. Although this seems like this might be a little bit of a catch-all, this in a lot of ways will give you more information and more ways to enjoy the birds that you have in your backyard. And then these organizations give you even more ideas and guidance on how to do it. And I'm involved with several of these, starting with the Master Gardener at the top, which is why I'm here with you. I'm also an active Virginia Master Naturalist member. Remember those birdhouses we built at our picnic last month? Virginia Society of Ornithology is a great statewide organization that has trips, publications. They do all sorts of research. Just truly great. We are extremely lucky to have such a great bird club right here in Williamsburg that's been going on for many, many years. They run public bird walks. You don't have to be a member to join those, but membership is not that much, and you get to again join this just incredible group of birders. Norfolk Botanical Gardens is our sponsor today. They have lots of volunteer opportunities, education programs such as this. And finally, the Virginia Native Plant Society, which is we're in the John Clayton chapter. There's so much information, so many enthusiastic people there. Don't feel like you don't know enough to join any of these organizations. They will welcome you with open arms, and they'll meet you where you are, and make your experience again with your birds in your yard and all these other things more worthwhile. These are honestly some of the greatest people I know in Williamsburg is through these organizations. Can't recommend them enough. I'm going to give a little bit of a plug to one of the programs with Master Gardener called Landscape Love, and I did a bunch of these in my training this year, where you actually sign up through their website to have a group of Master Gardeners come to your house, and they will do anything from just one flower bed to your entire yard, and you can be very specific with your goals. And after this talk, you say, I want to put in a native garden that's friendly to birds. They will research it. They'll know a little bit about your property. They may even actually, know the neighborhood already, and they'll come on out and they'll give you all these ideas and a written report, of which I wrote a bunch of these. This is a home visit. It doesn't cost anything, and it's not even a one-time deal. So they'll come back a year or 2 years later to see how you're doing and give you more direction. And this is one of the I think it's one of the greatest programs that we offer, because we're out there in the community, help people get what they want in their yard. And it's been my hope that I'm convincing you to go native with your yard, and Landscape Love can get you there. So also just almost to the end, if you want to participate more with birds, there are these bird counts that happen. And Project Feeder Watch, it starts right in your very backyard. So what you do is you sign up for it. This is through Cornell, and then you get a little packet with this cool poster, by the way, that I love. And they don't expect you to be experts. If you have an iPhone, you can actually get the app and just tap on the bird that you see, and it starts counting it. You can do it on sheets if you want to and submit it. It started last weekend, goes through April 30th. I did this with my kids when they were growing up. I love this program. It will make you a better birder. It will make you think about all sorts of things to do, and you get to see some really cool things. And it's just a wonderful program. The Audubon Christmas Bird Count has been going on for generations. The Williamsburg Bird Club is the one who's actually kind of our local sponsor for it. But you can just go to Audubon's site, tell them you want to be part of it, and they will actually connect you with, who's doing it. It doesn't run that entire time. Usually it's just one weekend, but you'll be paired with, if you go out with a group with these like really great birders. And this is how you become a better birder too. Winter Wildlife Festival is at the end of January, and they do a backyard bird challenge. It is a competition, but I wouldn't worry so much about that. Is the very cool t-shirt that you get for just being part of it. So you sit with your friends drinking hot chocolate, counting the birds in your backyard for a few hours. If you want to go to the festival itself, there's all sorts of outings. There's great classes. It's extremely well run, and they're back to almost normal this year. I can't wait to get back to again. And then finally in February, there's the backyard bird count. Goes from the 18th to the 21st, and again, similar to Feeder Watch, with a few different rules, but it's a way for you to have your bird habitat contribute to a national database. People do ask, where do you buy native plants? Keep your eyes and ears open. Talk to your friends that that are a little more involved in this. Native Plant Society does a really great spring sale. It's moved around a little bit over the years, but the prices are really good. And you can get, this is all run by volunteers. They're more than happy to help you if you walk up and say, I'm here because I want to make my garden more bird and insect friendly. They will point you in the right direction. Williamsburg Botanical Garden does a spring honor box, and that's the picture that you see there. And it usually has a pretty good selection actually through May, which is in the spring when they do it. So you don't have to even plan, if you can't make the other sales because of your schedule, you can just pop over there on your own time. Virginia Live Museum has two really big native plant sales in the spring and fall. And then if you go to the Native Plant Society, you can actually see where there's plant sales all over the state. So if you want to just decide to go somewhere fun and new, you can do this. And these are going on all over the place. So that's it. And I just wanted to say thank you guys. And now with this, I am officially no longer an intern. I am a master gardener. So thank you for letting me finish my journey with you. And I see Judith's back on here. I think I probably ran a little long, but maybe a lot. I think she's going to give me the hook here. Do we want to do questions, or how do you want to handle that?
Yes, I've been monitoring the chat, and I will read them to you. Here we go. So starting at the top early on, and here's the thing, Dean, some people, do have to leave at a certain time.
Sure.
And, but we had 45 people on, and we still have 32 of them. Okay. So they want this information.
Okay.
You have packed a lot of info. So first question, do any birds eat ticks?
I'm sure they do, but I don't know which one specifically. I don't think they're going to go picking them off the back of your dog, but that's not how you usually pick them up. It's usually deer that run through neighborhoods that leave them. I would imagine they did, but I don't know specifically ones that take as part of their diet. But I don't know why they wouldn't. It seems like a perfectly normal thing for them to eat.
Okay.
I can't imagine why they wouldn't.
Lynn wanted to know a source for wax myrtles, and Bev, who evidently must work for the Virginia Living Museum, thank you, Bev, says that the VLM sells them at the spring and fall plant sale, and they will get one for you if you ask. So Bev, I will reach out to you after this and get more information.
Okay.
And I totally agree. The VLM plant sale is a wonder.
It is.
Next question. If leaves are chopped up with a mower, are they still useful for the birds?
Yes. In fact, with Landscape Love, I remember more than once we were recommending that they go through and run the mower over them twice. A lot of people don't like having leaves just raked up because they think it looks unfinished. But you'll find that once you've run over it the second time with the leaves, it looks just like any other mulch that people bring in commercially. It is very attractive, but it doesn't compact down, and it provides that that habitat where you're going to find all those all those food sources.
Okay.
Much more than like hardwood or other things. Yeah.
Okay. Are there any snags from any particular tree species that birds do not like?
I'm not sure about that, honestly. I've seen pines, I've seen, old oak trees. I will tell you that it's got to be dead before the woodpecker can bore a hole into it. But I don't know if there's one that they prefer over the other. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
Do birds stay away if feeders aren't as clean? Because somebody said they don't always remember to clean them.
Yeah, oh yeah, you'll eventually have no birds on your feeder. They start getting moldy. That's the challenge in late summer and it's not just the rains, but it's also the humidity in the air. I recommend people they cut their seed in half from the feeder. Don't try to fill it. They've been so used to filling their feeders since wintertime. Fill it like a half or a third, and then I keep my seed in the refrigerator or the freezer, so I know it's fresh when I put it out. Just as much as I know that they're going to eat in just a few days.
That is good information. Wow. Karen wants to know, what's your opinion about spray-on enzyme bird bath cleaners? Is just scrubbing with a stiff brush good enough?
I've used those, and I always find out I go back to bleach, and it's because I'm trying to get stains off too, and maybe this is me being lazy. Enzymes do work, and the same thing. They sit on there and they pull it out. The one time, maybe enzymes, sorry, the enzymes might work better if you have a real buildup of seeds. Enzymes will actually, sorry. Enzymes will start breaking up the seeds that are in there to make it, because that's something that bleach doesn't tend to do as well. Enzymes, because sometimes if people leave a feeder for too long, sorry about
Take a
that.
drink. Get a drink of water.
I do have my drink. I'm.
You've been talking a long time.
I have been talking a long time. Anyway, but enzymes tend to break up the seed clumps better than bleach does. But bleach is better for if there's any kind of disease or even a thought of disease, bleach is what is going to kill it more than enzymes will. So if I had to pick between the two, I would stick with bleach and a scrub brush.
Is it okay to soak a metal feeder in the bleach solution?
Yeah, they say that, if you do this for too many times, you're going to start pitting the metal. I've done it. I don't really have a problem with it. Most of the high quality feeders are lifetime warranted. And if you went to the manufacturer, say, hey, I followed your regiment, and I'm starting at a pitting, and if it's just cosmetic, I don't know if I worry about it. But if it's not closing right, because if the pitting is getting so rough, let's say on a squirrel buster, it's actually causing it to jam. I know these companies well enough. They'll send you free parts. Okay, that's the benefit of going with a really quality feeder. They will send you something new.
I will jump in on that one and say, remember that we were taught as master gardeners that when we're caring for our garden tools to use Lysol or Lysol wipes, not bleach.
Right.
Because it will pit it. So
right.
If you want to disinfect, the Lysol is your better bet.
Right, and just add to that a little bit. People also use vinegar. You got to soak longer in vinegar, and but I mean, just bleach does the job faster.
Okay, so next question: do blends contain a lot of the fillers that are best avoided?
It depends. If you get a really high quality blend, let's say you go to a big box store and you're looking at the blends that are down on the bottom that are just too cheap to be believed. I mean, 20 pounds for $3 or something. I'm exaggerating, but if you do that, then it's going to be full of all sorts of weird things that the birds aren't going to eat. But there are also blends that are in much smaller bags at the top, and if you look at those, you're going to see it's all high quality seed. So you can't necessarily say if it's a blend, it's full of undesirable seed,
So just like purchasing food in the grocery store, we need to learn how to read the labels.
Exactly. And what you're looking for, look for fat and and protein percentage. Okay, if you see really low fat and protein percentage, keep looking. And oftentimes that's because there's so many seeds in it, there's so much filler in it. It's just, because they calculate the nutrition across the board.
And I actually asked, is peanut butter okay? Because I used to make with my daughter's Girl Scout troop, we used to make bird feeders out of cardboard rolls and yarn and sticks, but rolled the tube in peanut butter and then rolled it in birdseed.
Yeah, you can use peanut butter. Try to get unsalted peanut butter. That's way better for the birds. There's a, I think there is a one that's specifically for birds. Just make sure it's unsalted. You're fine.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Because I'm going to do that with my grandkids. All right. So someone has a chipmunk problem since they're light enough to sit on the perch of the squirrel-proof feeders. Any advice?
Wait, repeat that again. Sorry.
Someone has chipmunks and they are light enough to perch on the squirrel-proof feeders, and they don't, so the feeder does not spring down. Any advice?
Yes. Okay. Yes. Chipmunks are a new problem for us here. Okay. I grew up here, and if you told me you had chipmunks like 5 years ago, I would have said, nope, not at all. But they have been showing up and pretty well documented. If we're talking about like a squirrel buster feeder, like the one, that's what we're talking about here, the ones that spring load, yeah. Take the top off. You can notice there's a little twisty knob there. Okay. Start twisting it so it has a very light touch. And so make it so it closes with just the lightest amount of weight. So you're going to adjust it now for, you can do that for two reasons. One, if you're trying to obviously now keep your chipmunks off there because they weigh less than squirrels. But the other thing you can use is crowd control in the wintertime. Let's say you get red-winged blackbirds and there's 4 perches and all 4 of them want to eat at the same time. You can lighten that touch so that if one lands on it, he can get some food. But if 2 land on it, then all of a sudden it closes down. But that same thing would work for chipmunk too.
Oh, just to interrupt, it's the perch type of feeder, not the tubular one. So okay. I don't even have, I have it on the lightest load, and the chipmunks, they climb and sit on top and they reach underneath and eat the seed. So,
okay. Wow. Okay. Yeah. The only other thing I would say is try to, how good I don't know as much about chipmunks as I do about squirrels. How good of jumpers are they?
You're going to have to unmute yourself. Very good.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think they're pretty good. They hang over as much as they can. They even prune the shrubbery near it and jump over. Right. It's one of those boxy looking. I have a couple of them. Perky Pets does one. And there's the bar, and the heavier creature, when the squirrels don't use it anymore because they jump on it and then they, it closes up where the seed is. But the chipmunks kind of just sit on top. I've seen them sitting there. I said, oh my goodness. Right. And I can't, I'm trying to figure out how to make it so that they don't eat it, or I can't make it any lighter, the spring.
Right. Is it on a pole, or is it hanging from a tree?
It's hanging. It's hanging from like a shepherd's hook thing. It's mounted in, but there are some shrubs nearby, but you gotta
move it.
You move it out, and the skirt baffles, actually I like them because you can fold them around. They're split, so even if like you have like the 2 hooks off the top, you don't have to worry about like sliding the whole thing down to get it into its place. And since chipmunks are smaller than squirrels, they'll have even more hard time getting around it. And I would go with so I'd move the shepherd's hook out more towards the middle of the yard. I put a skirt baffle around it, and I think that should do it, honestly. I'll make sure the feeder is above the skirt baffle.
We have to try. They're pretty good jumpers. I have one that's in the middle of the yard, and somehow I don't know where they came from. They chewed it up. It was a plastic tubular one, and right. it couldn't be the squirrels, so it had to be a chipmunk. They just chewed all the little perches off too.
Yeah,
okay, I think we're really getting into a lot of specifics. I'd like to get to the last few questions.
Okay, sorry.
We're gonna break this.
Okay.
In just a few minutes because we are extremely over time. Here we go. All righty. Sometimes I see chickadees, titmice, nuthatch peeking in and going out of birdhouses that wrens usually used. I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. So I'm going to pass on that one. I'll try and come back to it. Dean, we've got lots of great comments. Thank you and thank you and thank you and thank you. And congratulations on completing your Master Gardener time. The Virginia Living Museum will sell plants year-round. Just ask. Thank you, Bev. Thank you. We enjoyed this. Thank you. Chickens eat ticks. All right. Well, that's good to know.
I forgot about that. That's true.
All righty. Wasp.
Opossums. Opossums eat chicks too.
Ticks. You mean ticks?
Yeah,
Not
opossums.
ticks.
Yeah, that's a big part of their diet.
Okay. Very good. Okay. One of the biggest issues I have, this is from Bev, is wasps taking over jelly feeders, fruit, etc. And any suggestions?
It depends on the wasp. I put out these hand feeders for my hummingbirds, because I like to hand feed them in the springtime. And there's these really scary looking wasp that will come and just kind of poke around there. But as it turns out, solitary wasps are really very docile. You would have to squeeze them hard in your hand for them to even consider stinging you. I would actually try to find out what kind of wasp you're looking at. I mean, yellow jackets, they'll chase you down. But there are a lot of solitary wasps. Since they've laid their eggs somewhere else, there's nothing for them to protect. They're just, they're just minding their own business. So I wouldn't worry about it as much. When I've seen wasps buzzing around our hummingbird feeders, when the hummingbirds seem to know which ones are more friendly, they'll fly up and then the wasp will just fly away. I've never seen a real conflict that way. Yeah, but no, it's worth thinking if you're allergic to. But so many solitary wasps and bees are very, very docile and not aggressive at all.
Okay. I'm going to wrap it up. It's 12:01 and our follow-up email will include Dean's contact information so you can reach out to him if your question did not get answered in full. I'm sure that he will be happy to do that. So thank you everyone for joining us. A huge thanks to Dean. Congratulations on completing your Master Gardener requirements. So have a good rest of the day, everyone, and thank you again.
Thanks for having me.